title of this is Building the Team During Rapid Growth. But I think what we're talking about is really just building the team and having a plan for doing so in a lot of ways. And so I just want you guys to introduce yourselves very quickly, and we're going to talk about the hunt for talent.
Meena Mansharamani. I'm currently the CEO of Maya Kaimal, Fine Indian Foods. We're a privately held company out of New York City and Rhinebeck. I was prior to that the CEO of Go-Go Squeeze, which I grew really nicely from 7 to 120 million in 3 years. And before that I was at PepsiCo, so I have big company and small company experience.
I'm Cassie Nielsen. I'm Vice President of Talent at VMG Partners, which is a private equity firm in the consumable CPG space. Some of our investments have included brands like Kind or Pirates Booty, Pretzel Crisp, Justin's, Baby Organics, and I've been there for a couple of years.
My name is Josh Wand. I have a company called ForceBrands. I get to work with these amazing thought leaders that have built incredible companies, and we help them find their leadership teams and their functional managers within the organization to scale the business. So it's basically recruiting, organizational design, staffing, but mostly partnering with companies as they go through this journey to find the right people to deliver their mission to achieve the success that they seek.
So, thank you very much. Your company's starting to grow. What's the first step that you would take to assess your talent needs?
Where we are right now with Maya Kaimal, I always compare it to what we did at Go-Go Squeeze. And even though that was a different chapter in a different category, I still want to look for the highest talented salespeople first. And great brand builders. Like, those are my two focus areas. And we didn't start with a lot when I started this role this year, so we're really looking for hungry people who we can triangulate with our network to see how they really are day to day. And I definitely sales and marketing. And in our case, we're co-manufactured, so having unassailable operations leadership is pretty important as well. So those are the three things right now that, if those three don't work in tandem, then we're not going to do well. So those are the three things I'm pushing on.
So you've identified three really key disciplines in the building the fabric of any company: operations, sales, and marketing. Cassie, would you say that finance follows, or is that something that should be growing alongside?
I don't know if there's a perfect frequency, as it's dependent, but if I had to generalize, operations comes first. I will never hesitate to overbuild an operations organization. To the point that was made earlier, food safety, it's just a must-have. I also will caution that, in my experience, filling operations roles will take twice as long and be half as successful, unfortunately. I have some opinions on why that is the case, so I think you should brace yourself for the challenges of building that team. From there, I'd probably say sales comes next. Now that you can make the product, selling it is important. I probably would recommend a leaner organization in finance and marketing. There are exceptions to that rule when you're looking for really specialized expertise, things like e-commerce, performance marketing, digital. No offense to anyone in the room, but finance can be a little more commoditized. So having a really strong but maybe up-and-coming junior team that's technically capable but may not have as sexy of backgrounds, that's a little unconventional, but that's where I would encourage being really lean and disciplined about building those teams.
Josh, where are you telling these people to look for talent?
Before we get to that, I would say there's not really a one-size-fits-all approach. It really depends on the strengths and the vulnerabilities of the founding team. The founding team might be incredibly talented in sales and distribution marketing, and the area of opportunity could be in operations and finance. So you really have to be honest with yourself, open enough, and find the right strategic support system around you, which doesn't need to be full-time hires initially, to identify those gaps, because you're going to have sales and marketing and finance and operations and in kind of e-com digital universe. So whatever your strengths are, we'll build around it. So I think that's one of the first, because these are a lot of early stage companies. And then you can really identify, how to put the right pieces in place so you have really solid building blocks to scale the business.
Is that something that you'd suggest as part of a growth plan?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, for any of you that are launching a business or have launched a business, you're going to be raising capital. And if you're raising capital, you need to have an organizational design hiring strategy plan. And you're going to have to look at costs associated with that, SG&A, cost of sales, distribution. So really headcount outside of financing product is going to be one of the most taxing areas of your P&L. So you want to look at that, and you want to build around that, and you want to make sure you have the appropriate compensation packages that you're forecasting at whatever stage you're looking to make those hires. But you can't build a business without people, right? And you can't raise a capital without people, because people are the ones that are going to help you deploy that capital to then achieve those milestones, which will result in a successful business.
So you're saying it's all about people?
It is all about, well, by the way, it is. And if you don't think it is, anyone can come up with a great brand idea, but human beings have to execute it. And it just might be 3 people that can do something awesome. And you might never need to use a recruiter, but you need great people. You do. I mean, yeah.
So where do we look for these great people? I think is the logical follow-up. And I mean, I think any of you can speak to this. I mean, we have a talent bank, we have a talent solicitor, and we have someone who's got a network. So let's talk about your methods.
I think it's a combination of network, and I use Force. I mean, when I started at Go Squeeze, it's not a plug for Josh, but I had used larger firms before when I was at Pepsi, and I really wanted a scrappy, resourceful, nimble player. But the issue that you have to have and own when you hire people, no matter where they're coming from, is you have to do your own references. And that was the best practice I learned from one of my search executive friends, that I literally call up the phone and do my own reference check. So I will triangulate round 1 phone call, round 2 in-person meeting, round 3 I'll give them homework to see how they answered a question that I gave them related to the business or the brand. And then I will personally do the reference checks, and that makes all the difference in the world, because then I have to live with what happens. So I don't just trust somebody rubber stamping how great they are. I want to do it myself. That's my process.
I guess the one thing that I would recommend, because I don't think there's a lot of recommendations that have that you don't already think about in terms of finding great talent. But if you can carve out a portion of your time to be proactive, that's probably the best thing you can do for yourself. So in my role, I work with search partners regularly. They're invaluable to what I do. But 30% of my time, I said from day one, I'm going to meet people just for the sake of meeting people. And I think that advice can apply to entrepreneurs as well. Great folks in the industry want to meet you and hear your story. If you can also during that conversation plant a seed about maybe working together at some point, that can be really compelling to them. But it should also be a great opportunity to learn more about what makes them really strong and what they're looking for before you have a job you're hiring for. So I say that because when you put out a job description, you're telling someone what they should tell you, like what I want to hear. And so if you can have a conversation that's proactive, that's not about a role, you can really understand why they were successful, what they'll be looking for, and make the decision yourself onto whether they would be a good addition to your team before they have the opportunity to tell you what you want to hear.
I think Cassie's spot on. I think the first area of opportunity is tap into your own network. And one of the things that I've always done professionally that has nothing to do with my business is I carve out at least 5 to 7 hours a month of just scheduling random coffee meetings. And when I'm really targeted and I research who I meet with prior to that. And I ask those people, say, who are the 5 best finance executives that you know in this specific universe? Who are the 10 best e-com thought leaders that you know? And I go and I meet them, and I pick their brain, and I hear what they can share. And it's just like manifestation. If you want to go connect with the best head of sales out there, figure out a way. Connect with them. Go connect with more people, because they're all connected in this industry. And the best thing you can do is be here like at NOSH, because there's so many thought leaders. But be thoughtful about it. It's not just about posting something out there to the universe. It's about connecting with other people and being thoughtful about asking questions so you can get to the right answer, which is typically, whether or not you're hiring them or it's a consultant or someone that wants to help you, you can get to them if you just make a conscious effort to ask the right questions about who are the most talented people in this area.
What are your thoughts about hiring for a specific skill area versus hiring, what one person called athletes, people who are showing potential in a bunch of different areas?
Meena has great insight there.
I've taken risks with athletes that have worked out really well, and I've taken risks with athletes that haven't. So I think it really depends on the situation, but I do, you ideally want to have evidence of somebody having done the job before, because we're so small and we need everyone to do a great job in the role that they're hired to do. But the best people are the ones who have the most stretch, and you can see them at the next level. You don't want them to be selling to you when they're being interviewed to that level, to Cassie's point, but you want to be able to see them as generalists. And ideally, I'd like to have, in my company, everyone really grow in their jobs, because we're small and we have a lot of room for growth. So it's something that's very specific to the individual. Not everybody can be an athlete, so you have to really take a bet on certain people. I don't know. Cassie, if you have any other thoughts?
I'm a terrible person to ask that question too, and this is why I'm hyper.
Because you have no answer, or because you have a really harsh one?
No. It's because I'm hyper aware of the luxury of the seat I sit in. And VMG, I've been there for 2 years, but the 10 years before that, they've done an amazing job of successfully investing and exiting companies. So when I am helping our portfolio recruit, I have the luxury of being able to check a lot of the boxes that I'm looking for in a role. So it means, I'm very supportive. A lot of our companies have amazing athletes that they brought onto the team prior to us being involved. But that doesn't mean I have good opinions on how to recruit for that athlete. Mm-hmm. More often, I'm able to find a specialist that's also an athlete.
And I would piggyback off of Cassie. I think the athletic requirements of a small emerging business, a sub $5 million business or a sub $10 million business, are very often different athletic requirements than scaling a business from $20 million to $100 million in different passion points. So you got to be consciously aware of that. Just because someone's resume say, I took this brand to exit and I sold vitamin water, doesn't mean that they were employee number 3. It doesn't mean that they want to be employee number 3, because there's a lot of work and a lot of hands-on grit, and you got to put a box on your shoulder on a Sunday afternoon. A lot of people want to manage people, and a lot of people want to do all the dirty work at the early stages. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to really be able to identify that and ask the hard questions. Say, at the end of the day, regardless of your tenure and your experience and your reputation, do you want to do this job? And this is what this job is. And it's not shiny because we're building the brand. And you got to be really honest with yourself. And I think that there's some athletes that can go from 0 to 200 all the way to an exit. But there's some that you bring on at a little bit of a later stage. And I think that as you start to put yourself around other entrepreneurs that have been on this journey before, you start to really get a feel for what those skill sets look like.
I would just add to that, one thing I've been really on high alert about is has somebody worked at a small company. So I had, pedigreed PepsiCo strategy innovation roles, and then I went and started something not from scratch. I inherited when it was $7 million, but I know what that was like. We actually got a new office, picked doorknobs. I knew all the paint colors of the office. It was really very different than having somebody at PepsiCo pick out my artwork for my office. It was a very different life. So the one mistake I made recently in a hire is that this person had not traversed through a small company. And I asked her about that when I interviewed her. I remember the interview really specifically. I said, well, not had a small company experience. You've been at this big company for 13 years. What do you think? Oh no, I'm really up for this. I love it. And it didn't work out with her, unfortunately. And I think that was the reason. So the one thing on bringing in an athlete is you can't fall in love with an athlete. You want to make sure they have the scrappiness of having been through a small company. And I don't like being the first small company they've been to, because it's a lot of work, and you want to make sure they're ready for that.
That's a great point.
So that brings up the sort of atmosphere or culture of working at a small company. And in fact, it can be tough, particularly when you're, say, under 10 or 20, under 20 people. You add a person or two, you're adding 10% to your workforce. How do you smooth those transitions in without sort of upsetting the delicate balance that comes from an operating entrepreneurial organization? Meena?
You want to make sure you're hiring for fit, but you don't want everyone to go native. I want people who challenge the status quo, who challenge the way we've done things before. I'm not interested in everyone just getting along and going out afterwards for beers. That's nice, but I want people to really do a fantastic job and challenge each other during the day. And I'm always biased toward people who bring an ownership culture to small companies because I don't want it to be about founder worship. I want it to be about the market facing outward and really owning it. So the more people take on, the happier I am. Not because I get to do other things, but more than I can stretch the company to the next level. And we all, at Go-Go Squeeze, we all read this book, Raising the Bar, by the head of Cliff Bar. It's a fantastic book about how do you retain your culture and make certain choices along the way as you grow. And I think hiring people who understand that you're here to raise the bar, you're not here to just blend in or just find a job because you lost another one. It's really about raising the bar. So I love hiring hungry people. And I think the people who don't work out in the companies that I've worked in are the ones who, try to get by with the least. And it doesn't work because in small companies you have to just stretch a lot harder.
I like what you said about there's a risk in everyone just sort of going native and not being able to be a change agent within a company and something that propels it forward. Are there any tricks you have for sort of measuring for fit, though, whether something's going to be too caustic in the new environment?
Can I jump in here? So I have some strong opinions when it comes to process. So one, little unconventional, but I hate job descriptions. And that's typically when it comes to process, that's the first thing you think of about to write a job description. I would recommend first starting with a scorecard. The best thing you can do to challenge unconscious bias that is inherent in any interview process is put together a scorecard and hold yourself to it at every stage during the interview process. Job descriptions are a necessary evil, though. I appreciate that, especially with more junior candidates. So I'd recommend, if you haven't used the tool Textio before, I think Textio does a good job of giving you guidance on how to elevate that job description, the language you actually put in it, things like masculine versus feminine language. If you're not familiar with a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset philosophy, take a look into some of the materials that are out there about that. And in short, it's the management belief that people can develop and grow. So things that are common in job descriptions that you would see are proven track record or genius or intelligence, things like that. Instead, if your job description is heavier on loves learning or is driven, is determined, you will see statistics say that you're 11 times faster to fill that job description and 2 times more likely to have a female candidate. And then the other thing around process is great candidates love rigor. So ask them open-ended questions. So not was it successful, your project X, Y, Z, but how, why, tell me more. Don't let it cut off. Ask hard questions. In hindsight, what didn't work well, what went wrong, and hold their feet to the fire. There should be an actual cost to what didn't work. And someone that has the humility, like that is a great indicator of a great operator. What else would I want to say in that respect?
That was pretty strong. I think they make really, really amazing points. I'm going to just add a couple of other points. I think protecting the integrity of your company culture is critically important. And that culture is developed not just by a founder, but a group of people, early stage. And I think they're the ones who need to be served. I feel as a founder, you serve your team, and you give them with all the tools and all the resources to be successful. And involving them in the process of determining who joins the organization is critically important to get buy-in. No one wants toxins in their environment. People want to work with other like-minded people that share the same philosophy, that have the same type of work ethic, if not better. But what doesn't work is when you involve your whole team in interviews and everyone's asking the same questions. So I think Cassie's point of scorecarding is critically important, and having role players. So if you're interviewing for marketing or interviewing sales, have 3 people interview that are the gatekeepers, but have them interview on core competencies and compare notes. But if they really like those people and the competencies checklist, you got the skill sets, you have the cultural buy-in, and then they really get to know each other. But don't forget, candidates this day and age, they're interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them. Those who think as employers, oh, they're just lucky to have a job, think again. Because right now it's a talent war, and people they have short attention spans, and they want to work at places they're really passionate about. So your job as a founder, as an entrepreneur, is to provide them with growth plans, succession plannings, upward mobility. That happens when you get buy-in from your team. They learn about your company, you learn about them. Once they're in there, they have other mentors they can deal with. So I just think that the old school days of just, everyone asks the same questions, interview and bring them in, it's over. So read Delivering Happiness or read Raise the Bar. There's some great books out there, but I think it'll really help you bring people in.
So you managed to bring up a growth succession question. I think that brings up another succession that we need to move on to, which is, where is this talent war taking place? What are the disciplines that people are having the most trouble filling? Where, who's most in demand right now? And how do you account for that talent war?
I would call it one in particular, and it's e-commerce. So my guidance around that is, first, take a step back, 10,000 feet. How valuable is e-commerce in your organization? So is it one of the top 5 roles in your company? Is it the top role in your company? I mean, how much revenue is that person going to drive? In many cases, it might be 30% or more of someone's company's revenue. So don't be too short-sighted. Don't get hung up on the title of that role. Don't get hung up on how much you would compensate that person. And look, I guide my companies all the time around fewer people, more disciplined about cash compensation. But in this case, that's where I throw out those rules. Also, what makes this role so challenging is you're asking one person to both understand distribution, fulfillment, logistics. They also need to be really strong in performance marketing, digital marketing, and also have kind of a P&L ownership appreciation. That is a unicorn. And so, on top of that, you're also asking them to be a strategist and how to think about building a business plan, but also do very unsexy work about executing, building A+ pages and time-consuming executional work. So think really broadly about what you need as step 1, and be open-minded that you may need a second hire at some point down the road. Pull the trigger really quickly when you find somebody, and don't be short-sighted about compensation. Use a search firm. Josh is great. Don't be short-sighted about the cost of finding that person, and get help. That's where I would focus on.
Do you want to know why e-com is so competitive?
Because they're all competing with Betsy?
Well, here's why. Here's why. Amazon doesn't want to hire your natural director of specialty. Amazon doesn't want to hire someone that manages brokers. Birchbox isn't interested in hiring an ops manager that runs co-packers. You're competing with tech. You're competing with Amazon. You're competing with Birchbox. You're competing with Warby Parker. You're competing with every direct-to-consumer business in the universe. You're competing with Gilt. You're competing with everyone. So when it comes to sales and marketing and finance and operations, all the traditional functional disciplines in CPG, you're just competing with this industry. When it comes to e-com and digital, you're competing with the universe. And tech pays a lot because there's a ton of venture capital and they just make bets. So that's when you say, how valuable is this business? Is it 30%? Is it 50%? I'd venture to say Peter from RX Bar was pretty happy they had a strong e-com platform. Dirty Lemon's pretty happy that they're going direct to consumer. It's great margin. So it's really a competitive space. So you got to think about that. And you got to look at all the other competitors that are going direct to consumer. And just like Cassie said, it's not like you just throw caution to the wind. Know what fair market comp is for that. And it's going to be a little bit more than what we're traditionally expected to pay for a regional sales manager or someone managing conventional or mass. But it can be great margin business and great awareness.
All right, one final question. For people who are starting to grow, and it sort of goes back to what Meena was talking about at the start, actually to what Josh was talking about at the start. How do you think about what kind of CEO you are to prep yourself for this growth idea?
Could I jump in on that?
I think, yeah.
So that's kind of what I enjoy doing most, because it's an incredible exercise of emotional intelligence, awareness, vulnerability. It's not what you do know, it's what you don't know. And sometimes you got to put on that hat and say, I got this totally figured out, no problem. When you're presenting to your board or your investors, the reality is no human being has it all figured out. So you got to, I find that sometimes going in a whiteboard session, we do these a lot, we call them organizational design strategy sessions, and sometimes we'll just do it over coffee with friends. Talk about what they're really good at. What do you actually want to do? Right now, you got to do everything if it's just one person or two people. You just have to. You have to know every function. You don't have the money. And you have to manage your QuickBooks. And you have to deal with the co-packer. And you have to do the marketing. And you have to make your sales calls. But you got to say to yourself, what are my goals in order to meet those thresholds or hit those milestones? At what point do I know I have to bring someone else in? And what should I be doing? Where can I add the most value to the organization? And sometimes you're so busy working in it, it's hard to step away and work on it. So I believe a facilitator or someone that can help you talk through that, or a mentor, or something. I think it's a great exercise. And sometimes you realize you have the answers within. You just got to be honest with yourself and kind of remove the noise. And then you realize, wait a minute, I'm not an ops guru. I should probably bring someone in at some point that could do that. It looks like Meena might want to say something.
At GoGo, we used this great coach to help us with roles, goals, and decision-making authority. And I just did this with Maya recently also, which is, what are we going to co-lead? What are we going to, you do first, and I'll weigh in second, and what am I going to do without your input? So I think having clarity on what the founder gets to decide and do, where you weigh in as the business leader, and aligning on where you co-sign things. So I think having that really clear versus having passive-aggressive energy or confusion and having the team be confused. So really getting clear on literally roles, goals, and decision-making authority, so the team is all aligned.
I'd answer this in a slightly different perspective. So, in my opinion, every CEO, every founder, I don't think there's any company that operates in CPG that shouldn't be prioritizing diversity. And so, in that respect, it should be part of everything you're thinking about when you're building a team. One example, EEO language is probably somewhere on your website. What is that signaling to a candidate? It's basically saying we won't break the law. But it's really an opportunity to talk about how diversity is so incredibly valuable to your organization. And it should be, right? Consumers, more than 60% of the household purse is owned by women. There's an increasing, the consumer is increasingly Hispanic. So it should be part of your strategy because it's who you're serving. And I think from a candidate perspective, almost 70% of candidates, that's one of the greatest things they value when assessing an organization. And there's endless statistics about how that makes the team stronger. So I think make sure you have that lens as well when you're putting together job descriptions, when you're building your website, when you're defining the values of your organization.
Yeah, or when you're thinking about organizational need.